Looking for the perfect hidden gem for your next night out? Welcome to Almost on the Lake, where the food is delicious. The service is top-notch. And the atmosphere feels like home. Family-owned and locally loved. Come see why everyone is talking about Almost on the Lake.
Nestled in the heart of historic downtown Wilkesboro, the 1915 offers a wedding experience like no other. Once a federal courthouse and post office, the 1915 combines rich history with timeless charm. From intimate gatherings to full-day rentals, we provide the perfect backdrop for your most cherished moments. With indoor and outdoor options, bridal and groom suites, every detail is crafted just for you. Make your wedding unforgettable at the 1915, Wilkesboro's historic wedding venue, where your story begins.
Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations. Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of life in Wilkes.
Good morning, Nikki Morgan. So good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too.
I was sitting here when we were having our tea. You're having turmeric and ginger tea. Mm-hmm. You like that, don't you?
I do. I like all of those healthy roots.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff. And I was, as we were just having a conversation, waiting for Tim to get everything set, I was trying to go back to when we first met. I think it was at Talia's, maybe one of those events that Zach Brewer pulled together.
I believe you're right. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think it was a holiday show or something like that. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, if it was a holiday show, that would have probably been Andrew Palmer's. It was Andrew Palmer's show.
It was.
That's exactly right. He raises it. He does those holiday shows raising money for one of his charitable causes.
Yes, it was.
So that's when we first met. Mm-hmm. I mean, aesthetically, you look the same to me. I know from because we've kept in touch, but I know that your music career and your journey there and performing has certainly evolved quite a bit, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. It feels like so long ago. But also not that long ago.
Right.
A lot has changed. I've toured a bit, and my sound in music has changed a little bit. I think we've talked once about me leaning more into my country roots.
Oh, sure.
So I've done some of that, and and I've gotten a little bit more community oriented with some of the stuff that I do as an artist. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that have something to do with your roots being in Wilkes County and how important that family and community is at church?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I come from double-sided ministry family. Both of my grandfathers are bishops, and I have a lot of members in my family who are ordained or deacons. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, that was what we grew up with. You do stuff for the community, there's always something that somebody is doing to give back. So it's just kind of ingrained in me.
So that's just there. You know, you and I were talking a few days ago about having you come in for the show, and I think we talked about it first at a performance that you were at the Pavilion in Wilkesboro. Yeah. You and your brother was performing. Mm-hmm. My goodness, your brother's incredibly talented. He's a great singer.
Oh yeah, I say that like his voice is like the voice that you get when it's like unbothered by all of the extra vices that sometimes we get into. You know, his voice is so smooth, and I love it. And he's a really great songwriter as well. So.
Well, it was great to hear the two of you perform together. It was that was beautiful. We were originally going to talk about your music and catch up on all your exploits and travels. But then in our conversation over the past 20 minutes before the cameras started rolling, we ended up talking about your church life and growing up there. And since we have a new segment of Life in Wilkes, which is we call Faith, and we talk with people who are from different churches within the community and get an idea of what their church life is like and just what life was like growing up for you there. So I said, hey, Nikki, you want to go this avenue? And you said,
yes, absolutely.
let's do it. So let's talk about that. So let's tell everybody what the church is and your background within the church, which is very rich.
Oh, yeah. So while I was born in Greensboro, I have roots here in Wilkes because my dad's dad, my grandfather, also known as Bishop Reed, he pastored a church here. As many people have seen it, a little church building on 115 Statesville Road, I think that is. And as a kid, I would come up here a lot because him and my grandma, were the heads of that ministry. And so at that time, it was Wings of Healing.
Okay.
So Bishop Reed, Wings of Healing. And then many years later, after it was no longer Wings of Healing, some years later, my mom's dad, who again is also a bishop, a pastor, has a ministry, he took over as the pastor of that congregation, and it is now called New Direction Ministries. Yeah.
How do you describe the church family?
Oh, that I love the people in that church, and some of them, and it's funny because I'll walk around in Wilkes, and there are some people who knew me and knew that church back when it was Wings of Healing, and be like, your granddad baptized me. I think Andrew Palmer actually was one. He told me that my grandfather baptized him, which is such a beautiful thing. And people who have known me around here since I was a kid. And that congregation is just so loving. Everybody's so nurturing. It's, like if you are a member of that church congregation, you are a family. So everybody supports each other, is invested in the well-being of everybody, checking on everybody. They do a lot to serve the community.
Like what?
So right now, so my grandfather and then my grandma, elect lady Morgan, she does a lot to do. She does a lot. So one of the things is weekly feedings. They still do the feedings at the church on Friday afternoons. We're always doing like toy drive for Christmas or clothing drives. They do the chicken queues, which in my opinion, is one of the best chicken queues. People might argue me on that point, but every time they do a chicken queue, it's so good and people enjoy it. They do a lot like tutoring for the kids that go to the church. There's a lot. I know there's things that I'm missing, but yeah.
But it's an abundance of caring, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk about how that caring, you growing up, learning how to be part of that family, your church family, and then music that you were surrounded by. Let's talk about how those things affected your life and affect who you are now, whether you're visiting Wilkes, you're in Chicago, you're wherever you're traveling to. Talk about how that shaped you.
Okay. So right off the bat, like from right off the top of my head, I can say that just seeing, watching people do something is a way of influence in and of itself without even saying a word. And I grew up seeing people who were willing to give any and everything that they could to people in need. And it was rarely a question of what have you done to deserve this help. It's just I see people in need and I want to help them. So when I was younger, for example, my mom had organized a youth, we had a volunteer thing where she would pull the youth together, I think once or twice a month, and we would go to elderly people's homes and who weren't able to do a lot of things for themselves or get out of the house or move very much. And we would go to their homes and clean and do just different tasks. And so I grew up with a lot of people who had a heart to give and serve. So
it's not all about writing a check, is it?
No. And that's the thing. It's like we didn't always have a lot of money. It was, but we gave what we could. And I've become that type of person, especially when it comes to like, I think everybody has their own ministry. Everybody has a way of giving and a talent to sow. And my grandma and my mom, they are always like the type of people who, if nothing else, they're going to make sure you have something to eat. And I really picked up on that. So like all through college, all of my friends always knew Dominique's going to have something to eat. I mean, I go by Nikki now, but like she's going to have something to give you to eat, if nothing else. And that's still one of my big things. It's like, if I can cook you a meal, that means a lot. And, yeah, so I just, growing up seeing all of these different examples of how to serve people and how to give to the community,
it means a lot.
It means a lot, and I think it laid a good foundation. And I'm in a place of learning now, what my ways of giving are. And as a musician, as an artist and performer, there's still things that I can do. I might not be Beyonce and have a whole philanthropic foundation, but I can still give, and I don't have to wait until I've hit it big, or I don't have to wait until I have $1 million to give.
Sure. You can give yourself. You and your brother on stage, and when I sat there and I'm listening to you perform these very old spirituals, even with the washboard, I was like, wait a minute, that's really good. I think there's a picture of Dom. Where's Dom at? Yeah, Dom Flemings. And I first met Dom in Charlotte when he was with the Carolina Chocolate Drops. So they were playing, forgive me if I get the theater wrong, but I think it was Spirit Square, or I think one of the rooms that had incredible acoustics, because they were doing everything as it was hundreds of years ago. So there was no amplification of the instruments. And it was just incredible, just an amazing performance. And I've since gotten to know Dom and interviewed him a few more times. And when you look at his journey as well, it's been one of a lot of giving of the talent that influenced people. So do you feel a bit of that?
Oh, yeah. I'm very influenced by Carolina Chocolate Drops. When I discovered them, it was like, I feel like I found a pot of gold. And I remember the first time I had a chance to see them live, and the stories that they tell, the history that they share. Him and Rhiannon Giddens, they are both big influences of mine. I don't claim to be a historian. In fact, I'm not the best with like remembering names and dates, but I can tell those stories still and relay the message in my own way. So I've kind of taken up that, not in the exact same way, because I think my inspiration is more so in sharing how gospel music is kind of like the inceptor, the beginning of so many different music genres that we have now.
Right.
I honestly believe that gospel started it all, and especially when you talk about like the great American kind of like classic, or folk
Right.
genres. I mean, even blues is an iteration of gospel. It was just people who were singing about things that the church didn't approve of, but they were singing the same way,
Right.
taking the same sounds and what they had in church, but singing about more secular or more about life.
Do you think it's possible, and maybe more likely than not, that when that's your influence and you take those influences and you do other things, do you think that there's still something good within inside?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes those musicians who end up playing everywhere and doing great for themselves, they circle back around as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
And they remember these things and they talk about those things. Do you see that to be true?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's examples throughout history of artists who have done that. I think even Little Richard, who was,
Right.
many would say is the father of rock and roll, who started
Right.
rock and roll. He, later in life, started doing gospel. And it's not even just to say, like, it's not even like a racial divide. I mean, spiritual music is something that most people get exposed to as a child, because a lot of us have some kind of exposure to those faith spaces. A lot of us have families who go to church or mass or whatever, and if you're hearing it, your brain is processing it, and it's going to be an influence on you. So if, whether it is you're in Ireland, or, you're in a Southern Baptist church, or you are in an AME church in Chicago, those sounds influence us, especially as kids. And as kids, we have less control of what we can do and where we go. And so with those being kind of like our foundational sounds, it's just in us, and,
Right.
and it's going to be there. And whether you stay in the church or you stick with that particular style, it's still an influence.
It's part of you,
It's
right?
part of you,
It's
yeah.
part of you. We were talking about some other ideas earlier that I think is very valid that we have this conversation now. And as society takes on its next chapter, and we see how technology is changing a great deal of how we communicate and how we digest information.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a time you would go to church, or you could have your church on TV, right? So those were basically your options. Then we have the internet, and now the internet, of course, has turned into this massive thing. And then you have derivatives within the internet and social media. So we were talking about that a little bit earlier. Share your thoughts on that, of how you see that, from your perspective, how it can be integrated within that community of faith. How do people kind of navigate things? I'm not asking you to be the definitive, but you are someone who can share your own thoughts on that.
Yeah. The internet changed a lot of things. And I was telling you earlier how my generation, we were really kind of like the first ones to experience the internet for what it has become or what it could be. When we were coming up, we had, I told you before that, we had Facebook when it was still just accessible to college students,
Right.
And
In the beginning.
and in the very beginning, when you still had AIM, Instant Messenger,
Right.
and that changed a lot. kind of like it broadened the influence, but it gave us access to so much more. So, as a younger kid growing up, my influence was very narrow. It was what the people at church or my family was giving me. And, if I went to the library, I could get a little bit more, but there were a lot fewer access points. And now with the internet, it's just like especially nowadays, there's so many things that can influence us, or we can find information about just about anything, or you can find someone, whether they are whether they are trained or knowledgeable on the fact or not, you can find somebody that's talking about just about anything. So I think that when you look at, I guess, how, I'll just say, like, from a youth perspective, as a younger person in church, I think there was a really big transition that happened in the outside world that church world didn't quite latch on to. As far as engaging younger people in the church. And as you said, many of us have a desire to connect with something spiritually. We have questions about who we are. We have questions about why we think the way we do, or just like, what is life and what is my purpose? And, if at least for myself and a lot of the people that I know within my age group or generation, like, if we didn't find that answer in the church, we would look for it somewhere else. And the internet is just a plethora of information. So you go looking for those answers somewhere else. And I think that kind of created a lot of opportunity, but a lot of
I mean, I think you see opportunities, but there's also a lot of danger.
Yes,
there's
that's
also
the word.
a lot of things that you can't trust, or you don't know that you can't trust it until you find out. But by your background, I would imagine that intuitively there would be some things that you would run across and discover that you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that's not right. Did that happen? Does it still happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so I'll just, I can speak from my own experience.
Yes, that's it.
So when I went to college and I started doing theater, because I started college as a math major, and then I switched over to theater. And I mean, talk about a whole change of pace, going from being a ministry kid who was in church all the time. And I would say, I don't mean this necessarily like in a derogatory way, but, I would say I was pretty sheltered as a kid. And then go into a world of theater where people are just extremely flamboyant. A lot of them have gotten to a point, or a lot of theater people have opened themselves up to the idea of something other than God, controlling the course of life, and some of them even being atheists, and and going so far as
you had never experienced that before, had you?
No, I hadn't. No. And so I have all of these different ideas, and this isn't even taking the internet into consideration.
Right.
This is just meeting people of different mindsets, and that was it. It was an interesting experience to be exposed to those things, and I'm glad that I was, because I think personally, I don't think that God needs me to defend God. God is God. That's just my belief. But I learned that in those experiences, and I would get in conversations with people. I've never really been a big debater. I don't want to argue, but I would get in conversations with people, and I would feel myself getting so frustrated, because it was like, I believe these things and you don't believe these things, and you're telling me all of these things that, and I just don't even understand, and that, a lot of times that would put me in kind of like a state of mental panic, maybe a little bit. A little
conflict going on.
Yeah, a real conflict. And it's not that questions are okay. I think it's okay to ask questions. I think it's okay to not have answers. I think it's okay to explore, but I'm very thankful that I had a foundation and a base that, like, no matter what the question was or where it led me to, I still had like a foundation of faith that eventually I came back around to, you know.
Did that help you as you're being exposed to all these different ideas and also from your faith itself, you knew that love and compassion is part of the whole thing, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you had that responsibility, and then you're hearing this, and what do I say? What do I not say? Do you find that because of how you were brought up, because of your family around you, which is mostly church folk, that it helped you in those times of where there was more turmoil and you could listen, but you didn't always have to agree, just to listen, and you could share some compassion. Was that part of it as well?
Yeah. And I learned that a little bit later on. But that is something that was a fundamental lesson that my family, my grandparents, and my parents taught me, is to see people for people. We're all human. Like something that Bishop Morgan likes to, kind of like an analogy that he likes to share is like, you know, if you're walking across a bridge and you see somebody fall over, your first instinct is not to ask, well, what does that person believe?
Right.
What does that person think? What color is their hair? What color is their skin? You know, what's their political affiliation? That's not your first instinct. Your first instinct is to reach your hand out and help them. And that is a testament to our connection as humans. So that was something that I was taught early on, is to just see people as people. And so even in those moments where I encountered ideas that I didn't understand or didn't necessarily believe in, I think I still was able to have a level of compassion and was still able to like interact with people, you know, and try not to, you know, go into it with anger. And I've always been the type of person that, like, if I don't know for sure, I usually try not to speak too heavily about it, for better or worse, you know. But
everybody
a lot of listening.
Sure, everybody has a different purpose, right? Everybody has everybody's not the pastor, you know. Maybe those who exercise compassion and caring without any limitations, you know, that opens the door to be kind to a lot of people, doesn't it? Yeah.
But it's, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't have your beliefs and your truths and the things that you stand on. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I'm grateful for, that those experiences have taught me. It's like, just because that person sees it differently or understands it differently doesn't mean that it changes anything for me. You know, I still know what I know from my experiences. And you know, it's not that those questions don't exist, you know. And I have, you know, one thing I will say, like, not to say that the environment that I grew up in was perfect, because I don't think any of us grew up in a perfect environment, because if you're being raised by a human being, there's going to be an imperfection somewhere. But one thing that for me as a kid was, you know, there's questions that I have, and especially now, so going back to the whole thing about the internet, you know, if I have a question and your answer is don't think about that, or that's a bad thing, that doesn't make the question go away. It just kind of stifles it, and maybe you can hide it, but that question still exists. And the thing about the internet is there's plenty of people who are willing to answer that question. Maybe not always in the way that is in the healthiest way or the best way or a good way, but there's going to be people who answer that question. So I appreciate church settings or people in church, and I think also even the people who raised me, we've, in the process of growing and learning, have gotten to a point where we can talk about it a little bit more. It's like, man, that thing might frustrate me, but you have a question about it. We can talk about it a little bit.
Has that happened? Has that happened?
It has.
As you've traveled and come home and you're having all these experiences, do you sit down and have those conversations of where, you're like, do I say that? And next thing you know, a conversation's going. I'm guessing that you were met with more love than conflict.
Yes. Yeah. Which surprised me, because as a kid, I was like, man, I can't say this to my mom. I can't say this to my dad. But then, fast forward to, the older versions of ourselves who have learned a little bit. And I found that in a lot of situations, they were more open to the conversation than I thought. So, yeah.
People know more than we think they know.
Yeah. And there have been times where, this is why I think conversation amongst different age groups is really good.
Huge.
With an open mind too. There have been conversations that I've had with my mom where she didn't agree with me or didn't understand where I was coming from in the beginning, and she allowed herself to be open to like my perspective, and she didn't necessarily start agreeing with me, but it opened her up a little bit more, and she was able to see things a little bit with a little bit more of a wider scope.
Right. And saw your perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's time for a little piece of music, because that always calms the atmosphere. But I think this is fantastic. We're having a conversation about a very real thing. You and I mean, I'm 61. How old are you now?
I'm 30-something.
30-something. Your little sister's behind us observing today, and she's much younger than you, or at least she's shorter than you are. And I think having these real conversations are extremely important. And I'm grateful that we have an environment that we can do that, and where different people of all sorts can sit and chat and have a conversation, and before you know it, we find out we have a lot of things in common.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So, two things. You've got Tim's big guitar over there.
Yeah, let me.
You take it away, Nikki.
Okay. I'm gonna do the song. It's called "Raise a Glass." It's just a kind of a celebratory term, right? To the struggle that, everyone I think has a struggle. And like you were saying, we find a lot of times that while we may think we are alone, a lot of times we see that we have similar experiences. And, talking about church and community, you can be around a lot of people and still feel like nobody really understands your pain or understands what you're going through. But when we share our stories and when we talk about those things, we find that a lot of us are dealing with some of the same stuff.
That's it, though. The power is the sharing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You don't have to hold it all in.
Yeah. That's what this song is.
Nice.
29 years I've been picking up messes that someone left behind. 29 years I've been picking up pieces of this broken heart of mine. 29 years and I'm finally wondering, when is it my time? 29 years I've been finally wondering, when is it my time? You always said there were just two options. Either you live or you die. And all those times that I thought I was broken, you said, no, girl, you're still alive. All those burdens that I tried to carry, shoveling bags through the doors. Well, just one word and I finally find that my shoulders ain't heavy no more. Raise a glass for the ones who have been through the struggle, for the ones who understand pain, who have lived in a world like no other. Oh, a world where none know your name. My first car, it was a broken down Plymouth. It was white with red velvet seats, true story. Every time it felt real cool, cause my grandmama gave it to me. Well, every time we would ride real cool, we would roll about 5 or 6 deep. Till the day that I sold it away, so my parents and brothers could eat. Raise a glass for the ones who have been through the struggle, for the ones who understand pain, who have lived in a world like no other. Oh, a world where none know your name. For the ones who have been through the struggle, for the ones who understand pain, who have lived in a world like no other. Oh, a world where none know your name. Hey, thank you. Oh man, this was so fun playing.
Nice.
New experiences.
That was great. So when we listen to that song, and that's your song, right?
Yes, I wrote that.
So how many years ago?
Man, it's been almost 10 years now because I wrote that.
When you were 29?
Well,
Ish.
I'm not 39 now, but it's been
No.
It's been some time. See, man, I got giving myself away.
Wait a minute. You thought I was being tricky there. I really was. I'm just going by
I wrote it when I was 29. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, my goodness, what a beautiful song, and to me, I definitely saw your church influence and just your heart coming through there. And you said those are just, all of those were pieces of life that you pulled together. And do you consider that to be one of your life songs?
Oh yeah. I tell people, or I used to when I did that song a lot more often live, that if you wanted to get to know me in one song, that would be a good song.
Tell me some of those, I didn't mean to step on you there, but tell me some of those comments that some of those people in those performances came up and had with you later about that song.
Some of the conversations that came from that. I think I'm having a hard time remembering on the spot, like specific conversations. But I've had a lot of people tell me that it made them feel just good to know that, like, that somebody else understood, I guess, like, the struggle. I've had people tell me that they really like the line about there's just two options, either you live or you die. And if all those times they thought they were broken, it's like, no, you're just still alive. And then, so I think that's one line that tends to resonate with people. And then also the story of, selling my car so that we could have some extra money, for my family. That's something that people
Was that a hard decision?
No, it just was just what happened.
Right. It was a thing, and it took care of your people.
It took care of, for the moment.
Right.
I got some good miles out of that car.
Yeah.
I mean, it was rough when my mom was like, we needed money, and
Right.
and it made me sad, but
You're not sad now about it.
I'm not sad now about it. It's just, that's how it goes. And I think
The people are more important than the things, right?
for sure.
Mm.
And in sharing those stories, because there's a third verse of that song that I don't always do. I do sometimes. But it talks about how I was almost 20 when I started to get good with the complexion of my skin.
Mm.
And because sometimes when you don't see others being praised that look like you, it's kind of hard to know what you're worth.
Mm.
And I've had people come to me and talk to me when they heard that verse too. And it's just it's kind of like this idea of like, one of the things that I think is so wonderful about sharing stories and sharing our experiences is, again, like, people can resonate with it. And sometimes the more specific you get, the more you can relate to people. So
So it's good to hit. So as a songwriter, if I hear you right, the more honesty that you can put into a piece,
mm-hmm.
the more it will resonate with other people.
Yeah, in a lot
Okay.
of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you have to go bearing your soul. Some people are just good at creating good stories,
Sure,
you know?
right. A little piece of it.
Mhm.
You learn how to be creative with a little piece that you can easily imagine that, oh, this is something that a lot of people are
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah, because I've heard it said, and I don't disagree, I've heard it said that in our modern times, songwriting has become very introverted. It's become very, like, introspective.
Mhm.
A lot of people, we write about our own life experience. And I think in days of old or in the past, a lot of songwriting was a little bit more general stories or myths or talked about more of a collective experience.
Right. Which do you prefer?
That's a good question. Well, as a writer, I'm more comfortable and have more experience with writing my own story. I don't know if I have a preference.
Mm.
Yeah, because sometimes I listen to songs and, like, it's just a good tale. Like some
Sure.
of those, some of our, traditional folk tunes that just tell, like, especially those, like, murder ballads.
Right.
Those, some of those are like, that's theoretically not a real story.
We hope not, but
it evokes something,
Right. A feeling.
Yeah.
A feeling. Well, a recent experience that we had in public at the Pavilion in Wilkesboro was, I felt, very meaningful, and it was a warm summer sunny day, and you and your brother were on stage, and I think that's the first time I've heard the two of you sing together before.
Okay.
Because the things that Talia's and other places I've listened to, I don't think your brother was there. So
Right now. He wasn't
so
there.
that was the first experience, and I'm really glad that it was there. But you did something on the washboard that I thought was incredible, and you brought your washboard today. So is there something that you want to share from that standpoint? Maybe going back to church life or a historic piece you want to do?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And this will be a good example of thinking about historic tunes. Something that I shared when we at the event
The Pavilion.
at the Pavilion is I was talking about the Fisk Jubilee Singers and how they were a big part of sharing Negro spirituals and slave songs and sharing these sounds and stories with pretty much the world. And one of the songs that they did earlier on is the spiritual Ain't It That Good News? And it's like, I got a crown up in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? And those are like, that's not a personal story.
Right.
That is a song of jubilee for what is to come, past the struggles of this life. And even those old tunes, like those old slave hymns and spirituals, some of those songs told stories.
Right.
Some of those songs told people how to get to freedom. Some of those songs were, just a testament of triumph. So that's a good example of a song that doesn't necessarily speak to a personal experience, but still has a really deep
It appeals
resonance.
to your storytelling personality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love you. Anyway, you were very good there. So thank you for thank you for sharing today.
Thanks.
I imagine a lot of people haven't seen or heard a performance on a washboard. I mean, in your church, was it something? Did you grow up with with a washboard? I remember in my early days of childhood, I have seen the washboard in church before.
Oh, you did too? Okay.
But it wasn't there all the time. It would be someone visiting and they played it, kind of a thing.
All yours.
All right. Okay, so, washboard. You say it's true. Not a lot of people see the washboard. People always get so excited about it. I grew up with it being in my granddad's church all the time. Before Bishop Morgan got to Wilkesboro, they were in Lexington, and they had a church in Lexington, and we would always fight over who got to play the washboard. So when I tell people when I became an adult, I bought my own. But yeah, this is one of those old traditional Negro spirituals called Ain't It That Good News? I got a crown up in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I got a crown up in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus, ain't it that good news? I got a Savior in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I got a Savior in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus, ain't it that good news? I got a crown up in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I got a crown up in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus, ain't it that good news? I got a mother in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I got a mother in that kingdom, ain't it that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus, ain't it that good news, good news. Something like that. It's a short one.
Wow.
My little version of it.
That's great, Nikki. How does that feel for you to, as we go down this conversation about growing up in a family of love and not perfection, but love, right? And growing up in church and continue to grow up and become a performer and travel and share your creativity with others. And then also be able to pick up a washboard and travel back in time for a moment and share that stylistic piece of music. How does that feel for you?
It feels good. It feels I'm excited about it. And when I started doing music, I've been doing music now for about 10 years now. Music of my own. And I started out just really singing my own heart song. My stories, sharing my stories. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm really excited to share some of the stories and the sentiments and the sounds that made me, that came before me. not and speak beyond just my own experience. I think a part of that is a desire to spread the word and spread these stories, similar to like what Don Flemings does and like the Carolina Chocolate Drops did. But also to continue the work of the people who came before me, like to continue the work of my grandfathers and my mother. I always say that, like, you see me, you might see me by myself on stage, but when you see me, you see them, everybody that came before me. Wow. And I am because they were. And I get to enjoy the benefits of the people who came before me. Things that my mom wasn't able to do, I get to do. Things that my grandmother wasn't able to do, I get to do. And, when my granddad, Bishop Reed, he told me when he was a young minister coming up, one of his mentors had an issue with, in particular, women preaching and speaking in church. And for him, that was not okay. So he was a rebel in his own right in that. So he asked questions and kind of bucked that part of the system. And throughout his career as a bishop, he has supported many women pastors and church leaders. And some people agreed, some people didn't. But that was something that he did, and that was his contribution to progress. Right. And, there are maybe some other things nowadays where I could be like, well, I don't really like how you do that, Granddad, but I get, seeing what he did, how he was brave, and he was, like I said, we all have our ministry. And just because we don't necessarily agree with somebody doesn't mean that we can't be in relationship with them. We can't be in conversation with them. In fact, that's why we should, because you might see something that I don't see, and I might see something that you don't see. And as long as we can be together and convene and converse and share, then we all get to reap the benefits of the progress that we make. So I feel very privileged. And, I also feel a sense of responsibility. I feel like I have this gift of voice and song and storytelling and I have the opportunity to share what I have to say with people like yourself and the people that I perform in front of, and people listen. Like that's something that I learned from my grandparents, my grandfathers especially. It's like you take that seriously. When you have the opportunity to influence somebody, when you have somebody's ear, I don't want to take that for granted, and I don't want to I don't ever want to put my thoughts and my own stuff in the way of getting the message that I'm intended to share out. So I try to say the things that are inspired, that I'm inspired to share, and I take the work that they have done, and I use that as my inspiration, and I try to continue that legacy. Both of my grandparents, of my ancestors, of, collective community of Wilkes, North Carolina, and everywhere else. Like,
Nikki Morgan, that's why I like to call you friend. Thank you so much for sharing from your heart, your musical talents, and even more important are those memories. Those family memories of growing up with people around you that you care about. Thank you so much for sharing. Look forward to seeing you next time.
As always, thank you. Thank you so much, Carl. It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.
Been through the struggle for the one